Hello and welcome back to the Raisina Live studios. And it is our very great honor and privilege to have with us now the Chief of the Naval Staff, Admiral Karambir Singh. And we're going to be asking him essentially in this discussion about the Indian Ocean region and how he sees it in the decade to come. Admiral, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
So my first question, I think, would be broadly about the Arabian Sea. In particular, it's now there are multiple navies that are now there that have a presence. In some sense, we have always thought ourselves of ourselves in India as being the net security provider for that region. How do we intend, and how does the Navy intend to continue that vital role?
You know, the Indian Ocean region, I'll talk about the Indian Ocean region. I personally feel that India is blessed with its geographical location vis-a-vis the Indian Ocean region. It juts out into the Indian Ocean region, and therefore, and we have the bandwidth in terms of the population and the comprehensive national power to make a difference to the Indian Ocean region, and a difference for the good, as a force for the good. If you look at the Indian Ocean region, it's basically landlocked on the north, and it has access through a few choke points, which are like the Straits of Bab el Mandab, the Straits of Hormuz, Cape of Good Hope, the Malacca Straits, the Sunda, and here. So what essentially we do is we monitor these straits to make sure that, and keep a good information availability of information around us, to ensure that anything which is inimical to a free, open and inclusive Indian Ocean is ensured, is countered.
So it's very interesting that you said free and open Indian Ocean. And that, of course, has been our policy for some time, to ensure the freedomness and openness of these waters. In some senses, there have been concerns, not just in India, but around the region and beyond, about an increasing presence from navies that are maybe not local to the region. The Chinese in particular have been talked about on some occasions. How do you see our response to their presence here being?
The Chinese Navy in particular has grown at a staggering pace, if you see it. And before 2008, we didn't have much of a Chinese presence in the Indian Ocean region, but off late, and even at any given time this year, you would have found about 7 to 8 PLA Navy warships. You have Chinese research vessels. You have a large fishing fleet here. The Chinese have also built their bases in Djibouti and, of course, Gwadar, and others are here to come. Also, if you see the kind of defense exports, nearly 80% of the defense export is centered around the Indian Ocean region. So, where we are watching this, we are observing this, and I explained to you that our mission-based deployment and the idea of keeping the entire Indian Ocean region under surveillance, the aim is to see if there's anything inimical to our national interests, or if somebody is not following laid down or rules-based activities, we will take necessary action.
Now, in India, domestically, we are going through a period of some very interesting military reorganization changes. We now have a Chief of Defense Staff. And I just wanted to ask you, how are we preparing across the services, and in yours in particular, for what will be a time of transition? I mean, will there be theatre commands at some point in the future? What is required for more jointness? What is your vision for this?
Actually, the Chief of Defense Staff was a long-standing requirement, reform required in the higher defense organization, and I compliment this government for having done that. And there are many positives from this particular development. First is in terms of getting synergy between the three services, getting cost consciousness and cutting down costs because of one person controlling at least the allotment of budget, and making sure that wherever jointry can be done, that can be helped. And most importantly, in the ease of doing business, which was previously, as you are aware, the pace of doing business in the Ministry of Defence was painfully slow, and some of the decisions took very long. So I expect that with the CDS coming in and the Department of Military Affairs coming into full swing, we'll be able to handle many of our activities, and administratively, in terms of our revenue expenditure, we'll be able to control that very well. As far as joint theatre commands that you mentioned, that is still work in progress. But I think the final end state should be the application of force in a joint fashion. That should be the end game, and the contours are still being worked out.
Sir, I think that I'd like to follow up maybe on this point that you made about budgeting. And it's not a great time for the Indian fiscal situation. But in some sense, the military has suffered a great deal. And of the services, I would say maybe the Navy can feel that its capital expenditure is tightest. Not speaking necessarily just about the past few years or the next few years, but more generally into the future, how do you feel Navy budgeting will have to be looked at?
There's a British saying, we are poor, therefore we must think. So I think we'll have to think a little more into this whole thing. If there are financial realities that we have to face, we will have to get into issues such as getting more bang for the buck. By getting unmanned solutions, by reducing our manpower requirements on board our platforms, by networking, and of course by the tri-service integration to make sure that we get the full value for money.
That's wonderful. So just to summarize, I mean, I really liked your point about the CDS being an improvement in terms of the management of the relationship between the military and the ministry, and also that I think a point that is not often brought out sufficiently, which is that it has true jointness would have implications for budgeting going forward, and I think that's an important point to make. I would like to have to end, however, by asking you, the phrase Indo-Pacific is one that the Raisina Dialogue talks a great deal about, and we hear sometimes foreign leaders, including at our own dialogue, saying, what is this? And all the communities, countries and militaries in the Indo-Pacific may have different visions for it. What is yours and the Navy's vision? What do you think about when you hear the phrase Indo-Pacific?
So I'm a naval person, so the first thing that comes to my mind, and I'm pretty happy about that, is that the Indo-Pacific is mainly a maritime theatre. And that means a lot to us. Because again, like I mentioned to you, that we are, when I look at it from the point of the Indian Navy, I find that we are very geographically blessed. And therefore we have the ability to make a difference in this region. Sometimes people view Indo-Pacific as being against somebody, but as our External Affairs Minister mentioned, it's not against somebody, but it's for something, and that for something is what we say a free, open, inclusive and rule-based order. So if you can follow that, I think the natural corollary to this is that we do well economically, because commerce is all on the seas. If you do well economically, we'll be able to reverse this economic trend that we find ourselves in.
Thank you very much, Admiral. I think that was a very useful discussion, and I particularly enjoyed your last answer and the vision therein. And thank you for watching.
Thank you so much.